Welcome to Paper Trail, where we make academic research accessible and engaging. Let's see what the evidence says. So, before this new minimum wage took effect in California for fast food workers, there were dire predictions. We heard about mass layoffs, widespread automation, even chains pulling out of the state entirely. But the early data, at least, seems to tell a different story.
Indeed, the prevailing narrative was one of immediate, drastic job cuts. Yet, what the initial analysis suggests is that the impact on employment has been far more subtle and, in many cases, localized, rather than the widespread catastrophe some anticipated.
Minimal job losses? That really flies in the face of the conventional wisdom, particularly given the magnitude of the wage increase.
It does. It highlights the complexity of economic responses to such policy changes. The initial read is that the fast food sector didn't shed jobs en masse right out of the gate. However, that doesn't mean there haven't been any adjustments.
The policy itself, Assembly Bill 1228, was quite significant. It wasn't just a standard minimum wage hike. What exactly did it stipulate?
AB 1228 elevated the minimum wage for fast food workers in California to $20 an hour, effective April 1, 2024. This isn't just a general state minimum wage increase. It's specifically targeted at fast food restaurants that are part of national chains, meaning those with 60 or more establishments nationwide.
So, it carves out a specific sector of the economy. And it's not just the wage, but also the creation of a fast food council.
Correct. The legislation also established a 9-member fast food council. This council is tasked with continuing to set minimum wage standards and developing workplace protections for fast food employees. This mechanism means future adjustments won't necessarily require new legislative acts, introducing a dynamic regulatory element.
That council structure is fascinating because it provides an ongoing forum for these discussions, rather than a one-off legislative hammer. But focusing on the immediate impact, the fears were palpable. Restaurants warned of price hikes, reduced hours, and even closures. What was the basis for those fears?
The basis was largely economic theory and historical precedent from some smaller-scale minimum wage hikes. The argument is that if the cost of labor significantly increases, and labor is a primary expense for fast food businesses, employers would be forced to reduce their labor input to maintain profitability. This could manifest as fewer employees, fewer hours for existing employees, or accelerating automation to replace human tasks. The sheer scale of the increase, a 25% jump from the previous state minimum wage of $16, amplified these concerns.
So, if labor costs go up by 25% almost overnight, it's reasonable to assume businesses will react. But the initial data doesn't seem to reflect that widespread reaction yet. What makes it so difficult to measure the true impact of this specific policy?
It's akin to trying to isolate the effect of a single ingredient in a complex stew. The California economy is vast, experiencing ongoing inflation, changes in consumer behavior, broader shifts in the labor market, and other concurrent policy changes. To definitively attribute any change solely to the $20 minimum wage, researchers need robust control groups and sophisticated economic models. They'd ideally compare fast food employment trends in California to similar fast food markets in other states that didn't experience such a wage hike, while also controlling for all those other confounding variables.
And that level of precision isn't immediately available, especially just a few weeks or months after the policy goes into effect.
Exactly. The data available right now, such as job postings or unemployment claims, are snapshots. They can show trends, but disentangling the causal links specifically to AB 1228 requires much more rigorous analysis over a longer period. For instance, a slowdown in hiring could be a response to the wage increase, or it could be due to a general economic slowdown in the region, or even changing seasonal demand.
So, what have we seen in these initial weeks? What's the most reliable early signal researchers are picking up?
The most consistent early signal is not mass layoffs, but rather a slowdown in hiring, and in some instances, a reduction in employee hours. The distinction is critical. Fewer new positions being created or existing part-time staff seeing their shifts shortened is different from outright terminating workers. For example, some data points to a decline in online job postings for fast food roles in California compared to other states, suggesting employers are holding back on expansion.
So it's less about people being fired and more about positions not being filled or existing employees working fewer hours. That's a significant nuance.
It is. A job loss typically implies someone being let go. A reduction in labor input can also mean the same number of people are employed, but collectively working fewer hours, or that the growth in employment that would have occurred simply didn't. This can have a tangible impact on workers' take-home pay, even if their hourly wage is higher.
And how are businesses responding beyond just labor adjustments? Are other expected reactions, like price increases, being observed?
Absolutely. Price increases are a very direct and common response. Many fast food chains have already implemented price hikes on their menus to offset the increased labor costs. Some estimates suggest an average price increase of around 5 to 10% on certain items. This is a strategy to maintain profit margins without cutting deeply into their workforce.
So the consumer ends up bearing some of the cost.
Precisely. It's a way for businesses to pass on the increased operational expenses. Beyond prices, there's also been anecdotal evidence of menu simplification to reduce preparation time and labor needs, or a slower pace of new store openings. The automation argument also reemerges here. Businesses that were already considering more self-service kiosks or robotic solutions might now accelerate those plans.
Automation has been discussed for years as a potential response to rising labor costs. Is this wage hike actually going to be the tipping point for widespread adoption in the fast food industry?
It certainly adds another strong incentive. Automation is an investment, and businesses weigh the upfront capital cost against the long-term savings in labor. A significant wage increase can shorten the payback period for those investments, making them more attractive. An acceleration of existing trends towards self-ordering kiosks, robotic fryers, or automated drink dispensers might be observed. However, full human replacement in fast food is still a complex challenge, especially for tasks requiring flexibility and customer interaction. It's more likely to be a gradual augmentation of human labor rather than a wholesale replacement in the short term.
It's not like robots are suddenly going to be flipping burgers in every drive-thru next week.
Not next week, no, but the trajectory could certainly be influenced. Businesses operate on thin margins, and every percentage point increase in labor costs pushes them to find efficiencies. Automation is one avenue.
Considering the counterfactual for a moment, what if this policy hadn't been implemented? What would the landscape look like?
Without AB 1228, fast food workers in California would still be earning the statewide minimum of $16 an hour. The industry might have continued its existing hiring and expansion trends, assuming other economic factors remained constant. The argument from proponents of the wage hike is that $16 an hour was insufficient for workers to cope with California's high cost of living, leading to high turnover and difficulty attracting staff. So, while the current policy has its costs, the counterfactual isn't necessarily a perfect world where everyone is thriving. There are trade-offs.
Turning now to the Fast Food Council, how might its ongoing role shape the longer-term impact beyond these initial few months?
The Council introduces a fascinating dynamic. Instead of relying on periodic legislative interventions, it provides an institutionalized body for ongoing wage adjustments and setting workplace standards. This could lead to more predictable, incremental changes rather than sudden, large jumps. It also allows for industry-specific considerations to be taken into account. The Council's decisions will be crucial in balancing worker compensation with business viability, potentially mitigating some of the more extreme reactions if adjustments are made thoughtfully over time.
It essentially creates a continuous negotiation table for the sector, rather than a one-time mandate.
That's a good way to put it. It's an attempt to create a more adaptive regulatory environment specifically tailored to the fast food industry, which is distinct from other sectors. The challenge will be ensuring representation and finding common ground among diverse stakeholders on the Council.
How does this specific situation in California compare to previous major minimum wage hikes observed, say, in cities like Seattle or New York? Are there any parallels or divergences?
There are parallels in the types of responses, but divergences in scale. Studies on Seattle's minimum wage increases, for instance, found some evidence of reduced hours for low-wage workers and minor price increases, but not the catastrophic job losses predicted. New York's experience with a $15 minimum wage for fast food also showed some price increases and operational adjustments. However, the California increase to $20 is a larger absolute jump, and it's statewide for a specific large sector, making it a more expansive experiment. The Fast Food Council is also a unique element not present in those earlier city-level policies. So, while the economic principles are similar, the magnitude and institutional framework here are distinct.
So it's not a completely unprecedented scenario, but the specific context in California makes it a unique case study.
Absolutely. The size of the state, the cost of living, the density of fast food establishments, and the legislative structure all contribute to making this a particularly important case to observe for future policy decisions.
Looking ahead, what are the key questions researchers will be trying to answer in the next year or two as more data becomes available?
The primary question will remain the net employment effect, not just immediate job cuts, but the overall growth trajectory of fast food employment compared to what it would have been. Researchers will also look at the impact on wages for all fast food workers, not just those at minimum wage, to see if there's a ripple effect up the pay scale. They'll also scrutinize price elasticity, how much of the increased cost is truly absorbed by consumers versus the business, and the rate of automation adoption. Finally, the long-term sustainability of the Fast Food Council's decisions will be a critical area of study.
So this isn't a case closed by any means. The understanding of the full ramifications is still in its very early stages.
Precisely. The early data provides a snapshot, but economic policies of this magnitude play out over months and years, not just weeks.
This has been a really insightful breakdown of a complex economic experiment. If this were to be distilled down to a few key takeaways for listeners, what would they be?
Firstly, the initial impact on fast food jobs in California has been more nuanced than predicted, largely avoiding the immediate mass layoffs that were widely feared. Secondly, business responses appear to be focused on price increases and adjustments to labor inputs, like reduced hiring and fewer hours, rather than widespread terminations.
And the difficulty in isolating the effect of the wage hike itself is a crucial point.
Indeed, the dynamic nature of the California economy means that attributing changes solely to AB 1228 requires rigorous, long-term analysis, accounting for many other variables. Finally, the creation of the Fast Food Council introduces a unique, ongoing regulatory mechanism that will shape the industry's future in California, potentially leading to more adaptive and sector-specific policy adjustments over time.
That really puts the initial findings into perspective. It seems the $20 question, as it were, is far from fully answered. For listeners, what's the most important thing to keep in mind as this story continues to unfold?
The most important thing is to avoid definitive conclusions based on short-term data. Economic impacts like this are a marathon, not a sprint, and the full picture will only emerge over a longer period as businesses and consumers fully adapt.
And perhaps to consider the various ways businesses can adapt beyond just direct job cuts. It's not always an either-or scenario.
Exactly. Adaptation often involves a portfolio of strategies, including pricing, operational efficiency, and selective investment in technology.
That wraps up this episode of Paper Trail. Join us next time as we dig into more research worth talking about. If you liked what you heard, share it with a friend.
Keep reading the fine print.